Let me begin with a few items of personal housekeeping. First, my perspective is mainly around Parkinson's. However, my mother and four of her 8 siblings all died with Alzheimer's. I also have a very close friend who was diagnosed with ALS recently, and another very close friend whose wife is dealing with frontal lobe dementia. This is simply to let you know that I do have firsthand experience with other neurological conditions where the patients would certainly benefit from the same principles of care, and shared experiences can be very helpful. Second, as a longtime person with Parkinson's, my memory and more importantly, my mental organization are not always what they used to be. At one time, I could scribble a few bullet points on an index card and speak for an hour without missing a beat. Now, being realistic, I have to write out most of the details of a talk to keep me on track and prevent me from losing my train of thought. Third, as wonderful as the video technologies are that have been developed in recent years, allowing great numbers of people to come together from all around the world, this pre-recorded format can be rather difficult for the Parkinson's brain. Not having the visual cues of presenting to a live audience can be somewhat of a challenge. Fourth, Parkinson's has also affected my speech, so I can be somewhat laborious to listen to. Please bear with me, and I'll do my best to make this a good experience for you, the listeners. Finally, last and most importantly, I am not a doctor. What I share with you today are my own experiences and facts as I know them. The one thing I always try to make very clear to my audience, particularly when I'm speaking to a local audience, is never, ever, ever go to your doctor and tell them that Randy said. As this is simply my opinion, I offer no references. Also, I do not receive compensation in any form from anyone in the medical or pharmaceutical world. I'd like to begin with a quick bit of personal background. I grew up on the central coast of South Louisiana in the midst of the sugarcane fields, nestled between the cypress swamps and coastal marshes of Louisiana. I received a degree in mechanical engineering in September of 1982. I spent 7 years managing a raw sugar mill in my hometown. In the spring of 1989, I accepted a position with a chemical company in Southern Ohio, worked 3 years there, then moved on to a different company just outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I worked there for 27 years, 14 of those years after my Parkinson's diagnosis. Most of my time with this company was spent building a reliability program where I had to analyze and fix complex systems that include physical plants, machinery, piping systems, controls, and many other types of equipment. And more importantly, people issues, including the how and why of operating these systems. Now, my story. In late June of 2005, I went to an appointment with a neurologist here in Baton Rouge. I had noticed some strange issues with my left hand several months before, mainly a slight tremor in my fingers when I would reach out with that hand. I mentioned this to my family doctor, and he suggested that I see a neurologist. I had no clue at the time what he suspected. The nurse had me strip down to my underwear, sit on the exam room table, and wait for the doctor to appear. In the meantime, one of his assistants came into my room at least 3 times, looking for supplies in the cabinets for other patients. I began to think I was sitting in the storeroom. Finally, after about 30 minutes, the doctor showed up with a nurse in tow, told me to stand and walk back and forth in the small exam room. He barely looked at me and then said, "I'm afraid, my friend, that you have Parkinson's." Those were the last words that he spoke directly to me. He told the nurse the course of action, MRI, blood work, etc., then disappeared. I dressed, went out to the receptionist, asked her what I owed, paid her, and never set foot in that doctor's office again. I've also never had to disrobe for a neurologist again. In 2005, Parkinson's disease was almost a complete mystery to me. The day after my appointment with Dr. Zero Personality, I headed out to a Boy Scout summer camp in the hills of Tennessee with 11 first-year Boy Scouts, including my youngest son, Charles, who was 11 years old at that time. I'd taken over the role of Scoutmaster only a few months before. We had almost no cell phone service and absolutely no internet. Although in 2005, the internet would not have helped that much. I wandered through the woods every day, wondering what this thing called Parkinson's was all about. I knew some of the stereotypical bits: shaking hands, shuffling feet, stooped posture, etc. But like most people, I was totally ignorant of the whole truth. I wondered if in 5 or 10 years, I would need a cane, a walker, a wheelchair, the nursing home. When you're left in the dark with a life-changing diagnosis, such as Parkinson's, you feel very alone. I did not have anyone to talk to that whole week. And honestly, I've never felt more alone in my entire life, not before or since the first week after that fateful appointment. With a hunger for answers, I read everything that I could get my hands on. This became my latest reliability engineering opportunity. I had to have answers and find a way to fix me. Everything I read at that time pointed towards holding out as long as I could before taking dopaminergic drugs. The thought was that if you started on levodopa too soon, you would develop dyskinesia, the characteristic drug-induced movement, sooner, and lose the ability to control the disease earlier. My second neurologist agreed with that approach. Under his careful and wise guidance, I spent some of the most miserable years of my life. In addition to his medical advice regarding when to start taking the medicine, he also told me that I should not join the one local support group in existence at that time, because in his words, you'll be with a bunch of old people who are far worse off than you are, and they'll just depress you. This doctor was so wrong on just about everything. After receiving my initial diagnosis, my wife and I decided to keep the news to ourselves until we could have a chance to absorb the details and get a better understanding of what this meant for the future of our family, my job, and everything in between. We did tell our 4 children, who at the time were spread in age from 11 to 22, but they were all sworn to secrecy. I decided that we could wait as long as possible to tell my employer. After about 2.5 years, it was getting more and more difficult to keep this undercover. I had had surgery on my left shoulder in 2000. When people at work started asking me questions about why I always looked so stiff, I used my shoulder as the excuse. One day I was walking into the shop where our mechanics repaired rotating equipment, when one of the men working in that shop pulled me aside and asked me if I had Parkinson's disease. I asked him what gave him that impression. He told me that one of his aunts had Parkinson's for years, and my movements were very similar to hers. I swore him to secrecy and told him that he was correct. For many years after, every time I passed this gentleman, he would ask how I was doing. This simple act of kindness was such an overwhelming comfort to me. I don't have the words to do it justice. This man retired in 2012. I retired in 2019. And he still calls periodically to check on me. The last time was just 3 weeks ago. This kind gesture will stay with me for the rest of my life. This was one of many instances that made me decide that it was time to let everyone know that I had Parkinson's disease. I certainly wasn't looking for pity. I just wanted people to have an understanding of why I had such difficulty with seemingly easy tasks. The first people I had to tell were my own father and mother. That was the hardest of all. It was though telling them made it a reality for me as well. I have one sister and 2 brothers. I called my sister to tell her and broke down in the process. I knew then that I could not keep my composure with my brothers, so I had to get my sister to call them for me. Before I was comfortable revealing my condition to my employer, I decided to consult with an attorney just to make sure that I had all my bases covered. I called a close friend who's a local patent attorney, and he recommended that I speak to someone who specialized in ADA cases. My wife and I set up an appointment and went to see him. He suggested that I write a letter to the HR manager at the plant where I worked, then let the attorney review it and send it in for me. I found that he wanted to take an adversarial tone with my employer. In the end, I decided to trust the management that I had worked for so successfully for many years. My trust was rewarded, and basically, the agreement was that it would be business as usual, and I would let them know if I needed anything. I used the computer extensively for my work and was having trouble typing. I asked for a voice recognition program to assist me, which was supplied with no questions asked. After about 3 years with neurologist number 2, I was discussing my care with our company doctor, who is now my general practitioner. And he gave me the number of a neurologist in New Orleans that he thought I should see. I made the call the next day. I spoke to one of his assistants, who quickly told me that this doctor was semi-retired and would not be seeing new patients. I asked her for a few minutes of her time. She agreed, and I began to tell my story. If I've learned one lesson well, it's that if you tell your Parkinson's story every chance you get, good things will follow. After a few minutes of listening patiently, she said that she'd get back to me. The next day she called and said that this doctor would see me. This was my first turning point. This doctor was a true physician in every sense of the word, a knowledgeable movement disorder specialist, a friend, and an all-around wonderful human being. He never treated a disease, he treated patients with a disease. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive to his clinic from my home. I was willing to make that drive as long as I needed to. This doctor started me on 2 medications right away, rasagiline, an MAOB inhibitor, and ropinirole, one of the dopamine agonists often used to treat early Parkinson's disease. He also encouraged me to keep seeing my local neurologist, to have someone nearby in case I needed some quick help. My local neurologist did not like this arrangement at all. From about year 3, I started getting involved in numerous PD groups. I joined several online forums, shared ideas and thoughts with folks around this nation and a few from other countries around the world. But there was something that was missing. In 2012, I got word that a new support group had been started in our area that met on Saturday mornings. Although still hesitant, Because of the advice I had been given, I joined this group. I met some wonderful people here. I joined this ever-growing group who have become like family to me. Over time, I began meeting other people with Parkinson's in my area. Lots and lots of people with Parkinson's. I joined the planning committee for our statewide Parkinson's conference. Then, in its second year, got involved in a 5-year clinical trial with my doctor in New Orleans and seized every opportunity to get involved. I did this while trying to hold down a full-time plus engineering job and raise my young family. Around my 5th year of dealing with Parkinson's and my mother's Alzheimer's, we had an issue with my second neurologist here in Baton Rouge. I did some research and found a movement disorder specialist at the local neuromedical center. His background and reviews looked like the doctor that I would want to see. I made a few phone calls, got a referral, and a few weeks later was a new patient with this neurologist. He turned out to be a good fit for me. One thing I always remind our local Parkinson's patients is the fact that doctors are people too. They have the same issues as us regular people, although I try to remind my own doctor not to be too regular. My criteria for my own medical team is knowledge coupled with the right personality for me. With my engineering background, I want my doctors to be willing to give me the facts about whichever condition they may be treating. Speaking to the assistant as though I were not even in the room is near the top of my list as a reason for dismissal. In the years since, I've assumed the leadership role of the support group that I had joined, been on the grant approval committees for Parkinson's Foundation at both state and regional levels, chaired the statewide conference organizing committee for several years, and numerous other activities and volunteer roles in our local community. Sometime around 2013 or so, my neurologist mentioned a relatively new procedure called deep brain stimulation, DBS for short. This procedure was FDA approved for Parkinson's disease in the US only in 2003. This is a surgical procedure where a neurosurgeon drills 1 or 2 holes in the victim's skull, inserts wires through the brain to an area called the substantia nigra, hooks them to a battery installed in the chest, and feeds electricity into the brain. All or most of this is done while the victim is awake. My initial response to this was, "You want to do what? Drill a hole in my skull? Stick wires through my brain? Not a chance." About that time, my work got seriously busy. I received a call one day from my boss telling me that I had been assigned to the major projects team and I was to prepare to quickly give everything I had been working on to this point to several other engineers in our department. This was brand new territory for me, but I knew that I could meet the challenge, if only my Parkinson's would cooperate. I tucked into this project along with the rest of the team. We spent a few years in the development stage, then eventually began construction. I managed to work numerous stretches during the construction phase, meeting with the day and night shifts at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. every day, 7 days a week. This meant that I was putting in 13 hours plus every day. Then in 2017, I received the joyous news that I had prostate cancer. 1 surgery, 3 months of radiation treatment, and 2 years of drug therapy later, medically speaking, all is well. While I'm very grateful to an extremely knowledgeable oncology team that treated me, There is no way to measure the long-term emotional and physical wear and tear on the body of a normal person, much less one with Parkinson's. This also gave me a glimpse into a world where the probable outcome can be far more serious in the short term. Within a few days of meeting my radiation oncologist, I met a group of folks there for my assistance anytime that they were needed, including a dietitian, a social worker, and numerous other professionals. The years of taking the dopaminergic drugs needed to keep up my work pace, plus the stress level, all catches up at some point. My dyskinesia got so bad that I moved continuously. I had to take all the wheels off my desk chairs and replace them with glides. With the wheels on, I spent my entire day traveling to and from my desk. I was so much fun to sit next to in a meeting. If the person next to me had a drink, I'd suggest they keep it as far away from me as possible. This constant movement exhausted me. By the end of every day, I was completely worn out. Again, my neurologist suggested that I reconsider DBS. Now, 5 years since he first brought up this procedure, it was quickly becoming a more routine surgery, and there were more technical papers being written on this procedure. I agreed, and we set the wheels in motion. In 2018, I had DBS surgery, which was the next life changer for me. Some ways good and some ways not so good. The bradykinesia and dyskinesia that were my constant companions all but disappeared, and I was able to keep up with my grueling work schedule. However, my speech deteriorated terribly. I began to have falls once a week or more, and freezing of gait, FOG, became a big problem. Unfortunately, I did not have the time to do much research prior to my surgery due to the demands of my job. Once again, an opportunity arose that needed my engineering attention. I hungrily read every article I could on DBS programming. I questioned my movement disorder specialist, the local Medtronic rep, and even their competition until I found what I felt were possible answers. I had Zoom meetings with engineers from the DBS manufacturers and kept asking questions until I could thoroughly understand the fundamentals of the kit and its functionality. I constantly pushed my movement disorder specialists and myself out of our comfort zone. But I could not continue with this wonderful new technology, DBS, installed in my brain and have more problems than before. Eventually, working through all the parties mentioned before, plus another neurologist as a second opinion, I got some relief. With the research that I had done, we were headed in the right direction, but with the limitations on what the patient can control, it was going to take years. I didn't have either the time or the energy to wait that long. The neurologist that I saw for a second opinion basically reset my DBS controller to a baseline level and stair-stepped my controls up to acceptable levels for movement without the side effects. Of course, along with the DBS settings, the medicine that I take had to be revised as well. My experience and results were ultimately very positive, but it took a year of fighting my way through the system to get there. Too many of our brethren do not have such results or the energy to battle through a system designed to accept that this is as good as it gets. As I was thinking about my own struggles, I came to a number of conclusions. First, you must be your own advocate. Second, you have to be relentless in your pursuit of answers. Finally, I began exploring the concepts of holistic medicine and palliative care. After speaking to a number of people who really did not get it, I was introduced to Dr. Benzie Kluger by the good folks at the Davis Finney Foundation. In 2021, as I was finally getting good results from my DBS system, we were in the process of pulling together our program for our annual statewide conference. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Kluger as a potential speaker, and I was sold on his concepts of neuropalliative care. Since that time, my personal journey as a Parkinson's advocate has taken me in many different directions. Here in our area, we have 2 excellent support groups, along with many great movement programs tailored specifically for Parkinson's patients. Like many places in the world, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a number of setbacks in our area, resulting in the closing of some of our local gyms and the programs they offered. Many of the people in our support group cross over to both groups, and we always support each other. Through my work with the national organizations, I found numerous resources and great folks with whom I interact on a regular basis. We've even been able to assist others with their own support group meetings via Zoom to act as speakers or panelists to discuss topics that they may not have firsthand knowledge of. My role as a grant reviewer, approver, has given me insight on some wonderful programs around the U.S., some that I've been able to connect directly with for advice on building up our programs. Just recently, 4 of us here in Baton Rouge traveled to a city about 1 hour away to meet with a group of professionals who have begun a palliative care unit in their area. Our purpose was to share ideas with each other and to spread this care throughout our state and beyond. We had a very good meeting, and I've since connected with our local hospice. We'll be meeting with them in the next few weeks. I'd like to leave you with a very recent incident where neuropalliative care may have prevented a sad ending. This involved a member of our support group. He and his wife called me 2 weeks ago asking for advice. His neurologist made a change to his medicine from an instant release tablet to an extended release capsule. They were concerned about the seemingly huge increase in the amount of the active drug levodopa. Having been through a similar process with my own neurologist some years ago, I keep data on the pharmacokinetics of all the PD drugs that I take, being cautious not to find myself giving medical advice. I told him that in my experience, the increases looked to be reasonable, and they should discuss those details with his neurologist. I do know that this particular formulation acts very differently in Parkinson's patients. The following Saturday, they came to our support group meeting, and I could see how much this man was struggling. Again, I told him to get in touch with his doctor as soon as possible. On the following Tuesday morning, I called their home to check on him. His wife answered the phone and told me that they had not been able to discuss this with his doctor yet, but she had to take him to the emergency room Monday evening. They admitted him to the ICU, and a nurse had accompanied him to the bathroom where he began to throw up, aspirated some of the fluid, and his heart stopped. The cruel irony here is that this man became very interested in neuropalliative care after hearing Dr. Kluger speak at our virtual conference in July of 2021. He was one of the four who went with me to meet with the other palliative care group. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you for that amazing video, Randy. Just to introduce myself, if people haven't seen me before, I'm David Oliver. I'm a retired consultant in palliative medicine, and I still work as an honorary professor at the University of Kent in the UK, and I'm on the board of the INPCS. Thank you so much for an amazing video and being so honest. And I hope you'll be able to join in with some questions. We've got one very initial one was, your initial experience with a neurologist should be a case study in medical school of how not to talk to patients. Given that you were receiving such disappointing news, can you describe how the diagnosis interaction would have gone in an ideal world? What would you have liked?
Well, I would have liked to know that, some of the details. And again, it's a requirement of mine that the doctor actually talk to me, not his nurse. But yeah, this doctor was definitely known. But the one thing I did get was a clear diagnosis immediately. But again, 17 years ago, there was more misinformation than the information available. And just a doctor who is concerned with the person, and so the doctor I saw in New Orleans actually spent 2 hours with me at my initial appointment with him. So yeah, time. Tell me what. Give me the real news, bad, good, indifferent. But just tell me everything you can right there. So
it's being honest, and would you do you feel resentment, one of the questions says, towards those first two neurologists?
no, not really. One is the first one is retired now. I guess he's still alive. I don't know. I don't keep up with him. But anyway, the second one is still pretty active. We have he's not a movement disorder guy. And we do have some of our support group folks go to him, but his advice is still not very good. But he's harmless, I guess I should say, for the most part. But I don't really see him helping people much. But yeah, no, I don't resent them. Parkinson's is a very complicated disease, as we all know. And so we don't have all the answers yet. We're still, constantly working towards that. So I think that's something that Susan Williams referred to in her talk yesterday, about the Lewy body dementia. People, we don't have the answers yet, but if we just treat people like people, we'll all be better off. So
thank you for that.
Yep.
And questions come from Benzie. Another PD advocate, Kirk Hall, talks about the three-legged stool model of neuropalliative care, namely community organisations, neurologists, PCPs, and specialist palliative care. What do you see as the most important steps needed to ensure that each of these legs are stronger in supporting palliative care for Parkinson's disease?
Let's think about that one. I think that the neurologists are going to remain the weakest link in the weakest leg, because I consider our whole system here to be broken. I just don't see. I don't see them having the time that they need to dedicate to patients. Our neuromedical center is a for-profit hospital, so they have a CEO who's definitely profit-driven. That doesn't work in a medical setting either, to me. But I mean, we have opportunities, but the strength, the real strength of our local support system is the interaction with the patients and helping each other out. We're starting to get the neuropalliative folks or the palliative care folks involved. I've since I made that recording, I met with the local our local palliative care of Baton Rouge area, and they're very interested. So we're going to, I mean, my next step will be to meet with them and see how we can help them along. But what we need is the neurologist working in concert with the with the palliative care folks, and just let the neurologists do their job. But the big thing I need for them to do is communicate to people, make them aware. Palliative care is there for you. It should be day one of your diagnosis, So,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
And a related question, Benzie's put, what do you see the role of the PWP and family advocates in improving care?
Oh, I have. So the PWP and the caregiver has to be their own advocate. You have to educate yourself. Your response. I mean, everybody doesn't know. They're not going to know every level of detail, but it is your responsibility to understand as much as you can about what you're dealing with. Second thing is find your tribe, because there's strength in numbers. And the only way we're going to change the system is if the PWPs and the caregivers demand change. Every time we just have to break them down. Just every time you go, tell them we want this. And then beyond that, I think, something I mentioned yesterday in one of the discussions we had is combine all the tribes. We have a great ALS program here, and the cancer care is great, but neuro care, and we have ALS, we have we have folks with all of the different ailments that are represented here. We need to come together, and everybody needs to hammer these guys. So, and get involved, be an advocate. Join support groups, do whatever you can to make people aware, and always be willing to tell your story.
Thank you for that. And I think it fits in with more of a comment than a question from Helen Metzger. Being an advocate for those with Lewy body dementia after caring for 2 generations of my family with it, 2 with young onset, our experience is parallel in many ways. I believe sharing our personal stories are critical for clinicians to listen to and take heart to change their own perspectives, attitudes, and that of their professions. Individuals living with neurodegenerative diseases are more than their diagnosis and not subjects. Randy, thank you for raising your voice as an advocate. You are improving the lives of those with PD and beyond. So a very positive comment. And it struck me what you were describing is very much the compassionate community that we were hearing earlier on in the morning today.
Right.
And particularly your work colleague, who just was positive, was there asking.
Right.
Is a real sign of a compassionate community around you.
Right. People have been very, they've been wonderful. And when I retired, we had a little retirement gathering there at work. I had about 100 people, came to break bread with us and say goodbye. And at the end, I had my final talk to everybody. And I told them, I said, the people ask me all the time, why are you so outgoing about your disease or condition? And I said, because it helps people. There are a lot of people who they're embarrassed by their condition or they're ashamed of it. And I tell them, you did not have a lifestyle you chose to that caused this. Now, when I was a kid and they sprayed for mosquitoes, we ran in the fog behind the truck. That was fun, But there were also 50 young boys running behind the truck, and I'm the only one with Parkinson's. I tell them the moon and the stars align to bless you with this opportunity, and that's look at it as an opportunity. So you can do good by telling your story rather than being ashamed of it. And one of the guys who had worked with me for years, I actually put him in his position at the plant, and he said, I was at the gas station about a week ago, and this older gentleman came up to me. He said, I hate to ask this, but I cannot get my wallet out of my pocket. He said, because of you, I knew I needed to help this guy. So there
Yes,
it
the
is.
compassionate community goes wider.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And perhaps another question, knowing what you know about PD, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself immediately following your diagnosis, what advice would you give to yourself about the journey before you?
Exercise, exercise, exercise. We're working with our local YMCA. Now we have pedaling program. And my wife is my care partner. And we go on every Tuesday and Thursday. We go to the YMCA and we pedal like mad. And we're dripping wet at the end of an hour. So, but yeah, I mean, always move. I never sit during the day. From the time I get up in the morning, I have we work in the shop, and that's my hobby. And I'm on my feet all day long. I carry logs around. I mean, I have 1,000 square foot workshop, and that's what I do. So yeah.
Locally in the UK, there's a lot of talk about boxing.
Yeah, we do.
And I know one person I know who in our local group who actually his speech improves no end after he's been hitting the it always seems a little strange that at the other end of the boxing area there are people who may be precipitating problems with their brains by hitting each other's on the head.
They don't hit each other.
But he's just pummeling a box something rather than hitting anybody.
Right, there are any number of exercise programs out there, and people always ask, what's the best? I think cycling is very good, and that's what we do. But I always tell them the best exercise is the one that you're going to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one final thing, they've had a lot of discussion over these 2 days about neuropalliative care, about the name.
Mm-hmm. Do
you think it's a barrier for people to accept care, or?
I do. I mean, we have to get people off of the idea of palliative care being end of life. So Benzie and I had this discussion when we were talking about him coming here, and we agreed that he would not use the term when he spoke for us. So Benzie, you haven't done your job yet, because Yeah,
Thank you very much indeed, Randy, for an amazing video and the opportunity to have the questions and answers so thoroughly. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure on behalf of everyone watching, we'd like to thank you for your time and your advocacy.
thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity. So, it's been a pleasure.